At 7:30 p.m. on September 21, 2025, deep inside a Russian air defense bunker in Crimea, a radar console suddenly burst into life. More than 70 unidentified blips flooded the operator's screen, skimming low across the Black Sea. These weren't NATO signatures, they were Ukrainian. As sirens screamed and the Panzer system rotated into action, the Russians were unknowingly making a fatal mistake. Their multi-million-dollar missiles were locking onto illusions. This was the story of how Ukraine turned what looked like an ordinary fishing trip into one of the war's boldest covert operations. To the Russians, the Foros resort was untouchable, a fortress wrapped in security, protected by elite guards and cutting-edge defenses. The resort was protected by a top-tier Panzer S-1 anti-aircraft system, while Spetsnaz units patrolled the perimeter wielding Rex-1 electronic jammers. It seemed the last place on Earth anyone would dare to strike. What the Russians didn't know was that Ukrainian intelligence had precise information thanks to the Esh partisan network. They knew the exact timing of a secret war council. While Russian diplomats in Geneva spoke of peace, their generals in Crimea were plotting the next phase of war. A successful strike would deliver a brutal message at the negotiating table. On paper, the mission was suicidal. The drones had to sneak past the Nebo-M radar's 250-mile range, survive the Panzer's missile barrage, and dodge elite troops on the ground. How could a handful of plastic drones launched from a fishing boat outwit a billion-dollar defense network? The answer was deception, an illusion worthy of a master magician. At 7:15 p.m., 6 miles off the coast, a modified fishing vessel released 25 FPV drones. Their first maneuver was critical. Instead of climbing, they dropped to only 30 feet above the water, hugging the waves to stay below the radar's main sweep. Using Earth's curvature as cover, they sped up to 80 miles per hour. What Russian operators didn't realize was that this wasn't a simple attack but a carefully staged illusion. Of the 25 drones, 15 carried no explosives. Instead, they were fitted with transmitters that broadcast fake coordinates, multiplying themselves across radar screens. To Russian sensors, 15 drones appeared as more than 70. In seconds, chaos consumed the command bunker as operators watched impossible numbers flood their monitors. Human operators froze in panic, but the automated Panzer S-1 defense computer reacted instantly. It identified valid threats and began firing procedures. Ukraine's decoy swarm had less than 60 seconds before the missiles would rise. At exactly 7:17 p.m., the system unleashed its fury, launching a stream of interceptors into the dusk. Missiles streaked through the twilight, locking onto phantom targets. In a series of blinding flashes, 4 decoy drones were obliterated by tungsten fragments. On the ground, Spetsnaz units rushed from cover, aiming their Rex-1 jammers and firing controlled bursts from their AK-12 rifles into the dark sky. But trying to shoot those drones was like chasing hummingbirds with rifles in the dark. They were too small, too fast, their frequencies shifting too quickly for jammers to lock on. The Russians scored the first hits, but it was meaningless, a hollow victory. Debris from a downed decoy even started a small fire near Yalta. The main swarm pressed forward, unstoppable. Then came a chilling realization. 4 confirmed kills, yet the radar picture hadn't thinned. The sky was still thick with threats. The operators understood too late they had fallen for the trap. They had wasted precious, million-dollar missiles on cheap fakes. The surprise was gone. Sevastopol's defenses were on full alert, and Su-30 fighters were preparing to scramble. The Russians' real nightmare wasn't shooting down drones anymore, it was figuring out which radar blips were real before it was too late. At 7:18 p.m., while operators frantically searched for true targets amid dozens of ghosts, the 10 real drones made their move. They had been hiding within the phantom swarm all along, using the chaos as their cloak. Now they revealed their secret weapon. Each real drone carried a modified RDU pilot chip, civilian tech, turned into a tool of electronic warfare. When activated, it emitted a narrowband jammer tuned precisely to the Panzer's X-band guidance channel. It was like flooding your neighbor's Wi-Fi channel with static. You don't crash the whole internet, just jam the vital connection. On the Panzer's screen, targeting locks blinked and vanished, unable to settle on a single real drone. The targeting reticles jumped wildly between dozens of contacts, unable to tell signal from static. On the ground, Spetsnaz soldiers fired blindly into the sky, their tracer rounds slicing through nothing but darkness, their radars chasing ghosts that didn't exist. The counterstrike of intellect had landed. The true drone slipped cleanly through the missile shield, leaving Russians firing at illusions. The route to the Foros resort now lay wide open. By 7:19 p.m., the 10 drones were in the clear, barely 1,000 feet from their target when pure chaos suddenly entered the battle. This unexpected assault didn't come from missiles or radar, it came from a luxury villa nearby. A panicked FSB official watching the defense collapse activated a portable jammer. It wasn't sophisticated, just raw static unleashed like a broken stereo cranked to full volume to drown out the noise. It wasn't a precision jammer, but a brute force weapon. The device flooded the air with raw radio energy, forcing the drone systems to overwork just to stay stable. From the fishing boat, Ukrainian operators watched in horror as battery levels plummeted, dropping by half in less than 15 seconds. On land, Spetsnaz troops made one last desperate attempt stringing anti-drone nets between trees. But it was futile. The drones were already inside the perimeter. Now the real battle was against time and physics. The stakes couldn't be higher. This mission was no longer about destroying a building. Failure now, this close to the objective, would be catastrophic. The entire intelligence network behind the mission could be exposed, giving Russia a propaganda victory at the Geneva talks and possibly altering the entire Black Sea front. The drones had 10 seconds to cover the final 1,000 feet. 10 seconds before total power loss, the Ukrainians made a desperate call. They didn't fight the jammer, they outran it. Pushing the throttles to maximum, the drones dove in an all-or-nothing charge, trading stealth for raw speed. They only needed 5 more seconds of flight to finish the job. The brilliance of the Ghost Swarm paid off. Russian defenses, still overwhelmed by phantom signals, couldn't react fast enough to the suicidal charge. The 10 real drones sliced through the chaos like sharks cutting through a frantic school of fish, closing in on their target, the Foros Resort's main restaurant. That restaurant wasn't a random target, it was officially listed as closed for special service. In the final seconds, each drone delivered its 1.5-pound explosive payload directly into the structure. The physical trap was sprung, and the political one was about to reshape the peace talks forever. Back on the fishing trawler 6 miles offshore, the operators acted with cold precision. The moment the last drone feed went static, they dismantled every trace, unbolting launch racks, antennas, and controls before throwing them overboard into the Black Sea. Nothing was left but the sea's silence. Then the crew transformed their attack ship back into a harmless fishing boat. Nets were unfurled, navigation lights switched on, and within 90 seconds the vessel looked completely ordinary again. They didn't flee, they just drifted calmly among other civilian boats. As the Russian military scrambled jets and patrol boats to chase a phantom armada from the south, no one paid attention to a slow fishing boat heading west. The chaos Ukraine had engineered became the perfect cover for escape. At exactly 7, 20, and 35 seconds, the 10 drones didn't explode on the outer walls. They smashed through the panoramic glass of the restaurant like a swarm of enraged hornets. A heartbeat later, the interior erupted in a synchronized blast. That delay wasn't a flaw, it was the point. Each 1.5-pound warhead had a half-second fuse, designed to detonate inside, not outside. The difference is like lighting a firecracker in a field versus inside a metal can. Containment multiplies power. The result was devastating physics. When 10 charges detonated in the dining hall, the blast had nowhere to escape. Pressure waves ricocheted off walls and ceilings, amplifying destruction. The shock didn't just shatter glass, it tore through support columns, fried the resort's electrical grid, and plunged the coast into darkness. The explosion had no path to escape. The blast slammed into every surface, floor, ceiling, and walls, bouncing back with multiplied force. The overpressure ripped through the interior, shattering glass, tearing walls apart, and weakening the main support columns. The entire power grid shorted instantly, plunging the coastal area into darkness. The structure collapsed from the inside out, a chain reaction of concrete and chaos. Ironically, this same resort had once been Putin's vacation spot. After tonight, he might consider Airbnb instead. By 7:21 p.m., the ground scene was sheer chaos. Spetsnaz soldiers who were hunters minutes ago now stumbled through smoke as first responders. Sirens howled, fighting to impose order on a night that had spiraled beyond control. Hours later, Ukrainian intelligence confirmed the impact through satellite photos. A 20-foot crater scarred the restaurant site, columns reduced to rubble. Moscow's media machine reacted fast, labeling it terrorism. But this wasn't terrorism, it was self-inflicted damage born from holding a secret war council inside a target zone. And that destroyed resort was only the first domino to fall. The initial blow hit Russia's Black Sea Command network. With senior officers wiped out, coastal defenses and artillery units went blind for nearly 2 days. Russian logistics, already a nightmare, ground to a halt, gridlocked like traffic in downtown Los Angeles. The second domino was psychological. Nowhere in Crimea felt safe anymore. Suddenly, every fishing boat on the horizon looked like a drone carrier. Paranoia seized commanders, crippling decisions. But the most important domino toppled far away at the negotiating table in Geneva. While Russia spoke of ceasefire, it secretly plotted a new offensive. Ukraine's strike became its opening statement, written not with ink, but with propellers and explosives. The message was clear. If you want to talk about territory, start with the rubble of this resort. 10 cheap drones had humiliated a billion-dollar defense network. It was a return on investment that any banker would envy. As diplomats sipped wine in Geneva, Ukraine delivered its own terms from the deck of a fishing boat, brilliant, daring, and a masterclass in modern warfare. Once again, brains outplayed brute force.